My name is Quinn Holloway. I'm 31 years old. It's October 4th, 2026, and I'm standing in the green room of the Brennan Center for Civic Engineering in downtown Sacramento, holding a clicker with 41 slides loaded onto it. In about 12 minutes, I'm going to walk onto that stage and give the closing address to 400 some structural engineers, building officials, and city planners. And about half an hour ago, the man who raised me, my uncle, pulled 3 of them aside and told them I washed out of engineering because I cracked under deadline pressure. Not that I left, not that I changed paths, that I cracked. Brilliant kid, he said, with that same little laugh he's been using for 6 years, but you put her on a real project with real consequences and she folds. Some people just aren't built for the weight. He said it to a county inspector. He said it to a woman from the state licensing board. He said it to a guy I went to school with. By the time the reception wound down, 2 strangers had patted my arm and told me there was no shame in knowing your limits. One of them said, "Honestly, it's brave to admit when something's too much for you." My uncle laughed and lifted his glass and said, "Quinn found her lane. Compliance paperwork, lower stakes, better for her nerves." And I smiled. I clinked my glass against theirs. I let him do it, because in 12 minutes, I'm going to let every person in that ballroom read what he wrote about me in the spring of 2020. The email that ended my career before it started. And he is sitting at table 2, 4th row back, with a clear sight line to a 20-foot screen. But before I tell you what happened when I clicked to slide 36, you need to know how I got here. If you've ever had a family member introduce a version of you that simply wasn't true and watched other people believe it, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and whether anybody in your life ever rewrote your story to protect themselves. I want to know I'm not the only one. Now let me take you back 6 years. March of 2020. I was 25, 2.5 years into the structural engineering group at Meridian Vance & Associates, a mid-sized firm in Stockton, California. My uncle Garrick Vance was the Vance on the door. He'd built that firm over 30 years. My grandfather had started it before him in a strip mall office with 2 drafting tables. 3 generations. There was a plaque in the lobby with our family name on it and a scholarship at Sac State that my grandfather had endowed. I grew up at firm barbecues, sitting on folding chairs in the parking lot while the senior engineers argued about the new building code. When my parents died, car accident, I was 19. It was my uncle who paid the rest of my tuition. So when I say what he did broke something in me, understand that I'm not talking about a boss. I'm talking about the closest thing to a father I had left. I was a junior engineer on the structural review team. My badge number was MV0244. My reviews were good. My last performance evaluation said, unusually sharp eye for load path errors, and recommended me for the project engineer track a full year early. I was on the fast track to my PE license and had already passed the first exam. I had a plan. I was going to be the 3rd Vance, Holloway, but you know what I mean, to put my stamp on buildings in that valley. In February of 2020, our firm took on the structural review for a 4-story mixed-use development off Pacific Avenue, retail on the ground floor, apartments above. The architect of record was a man named Foster Lindquist. The lead structural reviewer assigned to it was Roy Castellan, 30 years in the business, my uncle's oldest friend, his standing Saturday golf partner since before I was born. The 2 of them had practically built that firm's reputation together. I was in lead on the project. I was doing the second pass review on the connection details, the boring stuff, the gusset plates, and the moment connections. And on the night of March 9th, 2020, working late in an empty office because the world was about to shut down and nobody knew it yet, I found something. The shear wall calculations on the 2nd floor didn't match the architectural loads. The transfer beam carrying the load from the apartments above down to the open retail span below was undersized. Not by a rounding error. By a lot. If that building filled up, if it took a real seismic event, and we are in California, that transfer beam was a failure point, the whole load path ran through a member that wouldn't hold. I checked it 3 times. I ran the numbers myself by hand, then in the software, then by hand again. I wasn't wrong. I remember sitting there at almost 11 at night, the office dark except for my desk lamp, my coffee gone cold, thinking, somebody is going to live above this. I documented it. I wrote a formal review memo. I flagged the transfer beam as a critical deficiency, recommended a redesign before the drawings went out for permit, and I attached my calculations. I logged it in our project management system at 11:14 p.m. on March 9th. Memo reference SR 2020-09QH. Then, because Roy Castellan was the lead reviewer and his stamp was going on those drawings, I went and found him the next morning. He was at his desk with a coffee and the sports section. I'll never forget how he didn't even put the paper down. I laid out what I found: the undersized transfer beam, the load path, the seismic exposure. I had my memo printed out and everything. He looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "I've been sizing beams since before you could read, kid. The architect's loads are conservative. There's margin in there you're not accounting for." I said there wasn't. I checked the architectural loads against the structural model. They didn't reconcile. And he said, "I remember this word for word. You're a second-pass reviewer. Your job is to catch typos and missing dimensions, not to rewrite the engineering. Don't go chasing a problem just because you read about a collapse in a textbook." Then he picked his paper back up. I should have let it go. That's what every instinct told me to do. Roy was a partner. Roy was my uncle's best friend. Roy had 30 years on me. But I kept seeing that load path in my head. I kept thinking about people putting their kids to bed on the 3rd floor. So I didn't let it go. I escalated. I sent the memo up to the firm's quality control review. That's the formal internal channel. The thing you're supposed to do when you can't resolve a technical disagreement at the project level. I did it by the book. I CC'd my project lead. I attached everything. The system stamped it received on March 11th, 2020. I figured it would get a real look. A second set of senior eyes. That's the whole point of having a process. The drawings went out for permit the following week anyway. Stamped and sealed by Roy Castellan, my memo was marked, reviewed, no action required. I went to my uncle. I thought, surely he'll listen. This isn't about Roy. This is about a building. He was warm at first. He always was. He sat me down in his big corner office with the photos of the firm's projects on the wall, and he listened to the whole thing, and then he leaned back and said, "Quinn, I appreciate the diligence. I do. But Roy's been doing this a long time and you're new, and you have to understand, when you come at a senior partner like this, you're not just questioning a beam. You're questioning 30 years of his judgment. And me, by extension. There are ways to raise a concern that don't blow up relationships." I said, "Uncle Garrick, if I'm right, people could die in that building." And he said, "You're not going to be right, sweetheart. And even if there's some conservative margin we could tighten up, that's not worth torching your reputation here in your 2nd year. Let it go." I didn't let it go. I should have known then. But I didn't. 2 weeks later, the project broke ground. And 3 weeks after that, on April 24th, 2020, I came in on a Friday morning and my badge wouldn't open the parking garage. Just a little red light. I had to be buzzed in by a receptionist. A woman I brought coffee 100 times wouldn't quite look at me. There was a meeting on the calendar I hadn't put there. HR Holloway. Conference room B, our HR director was in there. So was a man from the firm's outside counsel. And on the table, printed out, face up, was an email. I recognized the sender before I read a word of it. My uncle, Garrick Vance, sent April 23rd, the day before, at 5051 in the evening, to the firm's managing partner in HR. Subject line, performance concern, Hugh, Holloway, confidential. I picked it up and my hands started to go numb as I read. I'm writing to formally document an ongoing performance and professionalism concern regarding my niece Quinn Holloway. Over the past 2 months, Quinn has developed a troubling pattern of inserting herself into senior-level engineering decisions outside her scope, repeatedly second-guessing a senior partner's stamped work, and escalating internal disagreements in a manner that suggests she is struggling with the pressure and judgment required at this level. Her recent challenge to Roy Castellan's review on the Pacific Avenue project reflects poor professional maturity and an inability to function within the firm's review hierarchy. I am concerned she is not suited to the responsibilities of project engineering and that her conduct is creating liability and damaging key relationships. Given our family's investment in this firm and its reputation, I'd ask that this be handled discreetly. For Quinn's own sake, I recommend we transition her off technical review and reassess her fit before this escalates further. I looked up. I said, I raised a structural deficiency through the formal channel. That's literally my job. The lawyer said, this isn't about any one technical matter, Quinn. It's a broader fit conversation. I said, what about the QC review I filed? On the transfer beam? And the HR director looked at her folder and said, very gently, that was closed out at the project level. That's when I understood. It wasn't going to be looked at. It was going to disappear. And so was I. They didn't fire me. That would have left a record, and a record can be subpoenaed. They put me on a performance improvement plan with terms designed to be impossible. Then they offered me what they called a graceful transition, resigned voluntarily for personal reasons, and they'd give me a neutral reference. If I didn't, the PIP and the professionalism concern would go in my permanent file, and good luck getting hired anywhere in the valley with my uncle's word against me. I had $81,000 in student loans. I had a PE track that lived or died on supervised experience, hours signed off by a licensed engineer, and the only licensed engineers I knew all worked for my uncle. I was 25, and the family name that was supposed to open every door in that industry was now a loaded gun pointed at my own head. I signed the resignation on May 1st, 2020. My uncle called me that night. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask if I was okay. He said, I think this is the right thing, Quinn. Engineering's a pressure cooker and it's not for everybody. There's no shame in it. We'll find you something. That was the first time he told the story. It would not be the last. That summer, what was left of my family did a 4th of July thing at his place in the Sierra foothills. Maybe 20 people, cousins, family friends, a couple of the senior guys from the firm. My aunt asked me, in front of everyone, how the engineering was going. And before I could open my mouth, my uncle answered for me. Quinn stepped back from the technical side, he said, flipping burgers, easy as anything. The deadline pressure in structural is no joke. Real money, real liability, real consequences if you get it wrong. She realized it wasn't for her. Better to figure that out at 25 than at 40. Somebody asked, but wasn't she doing great? And he said, she's smart as a whip. But smart isn't the whole job. You've got to be steady when there's $1 million in people's safety riding on your signature. Quinn just isn't wired for that kind of weight. I sat there with a paper plate in my lap and said nothing, because I'd already learned the rules. If I argued, I was proving his point. The hysterical girl who couldn't handle pressure. So I ate my burger and I smiled and I let 20 people feel sorry for me. It got worse from there, in the quiet way these things do. There was a family holiday email he sent every December to a list of probably 150 people. The whole industry network, the alumni, the family friends. That year there was a line in it, Quinn is exploring new directions after deciding the demands of structural engineering weren't the right fit. We're proud of her self-awareness. Self-awareness. I got texts for a month. Hey, sorry to hear engineering didn't work out, you'll land on your feet. I stopped answering. I stopped going to family things. I moved out of the valley entirely. By that fall, I was sitting in a one-bedroom apartment in Davis with $81,000 of debt, about $4,000 in savings, no license, no path, and an industry full of people who'd been told I cracked. My uncle sent me an email with the subject line, an idea. There was an opening, he said, in the firm's marketing department, coordinating proposals, helping with client events, $52,000 a year. It's not engineering, he wrote, but it's stable and you'd still be part of the family business. We take care of our own. Working in the building where I'd been buried, under his name. Doing fundraising broker copy for the firm that signed off on a beam that wouldn't hold. I wrote back 2 words. No thanks, he called. He said, pride doesn't pay loans, Quinn. I hung up. Here's the thing I want you to sit with for a second. If the person who raised you spent 6 years telling everyone you were too weak to do the work you were actually good at, would you correct him to his face? Or would you go quiet, disappear, and build something he'd never see coming? Comment A if you'd confront him. Comment B if you'd go dark and plan. I want to see where you all land because I know what I chose. I chose B. In January of 2021, I applied to a graduate program at UC Berkeley, a master's in civil systems with a focus on structural safety and forensic engineering. Forensic engineering is the study of why things fail. Bridges, buildings, the whole catalog of human disaster. I wanted to understand, with everything in me, why the systems that are supposed to catch a deadly mistake let it through. The application asked for a personal statement. I didn't write a word about my uncle. I wrote one sentence I meant with my whole chest. I have learned that finding the error is not the same as being heard. And I want to build the systems that make people listen. They let me in, gave me a teaching assistantship that covered most of it, but before I left for Berkeley, I did one thing. I made a folder on my laptop. I named it Pacific Ave 2020, and I put everything in it. My original review memo, SR 2020, SR 2901001QH, with my hand counts. The QC escalation, time-stamped March 11th. The no action required closeout. My uncle's email to HR. The resignation paperwork, the improvement plan with its impossible terms, 40-some pages. I printed a hard copy. I put a flash drive in a safe deposit box at a credit union in Davis. I backed the whole thing up to 2 separate encrypted drives, and I wrote myself a note and dropped it in the folder. I don't know if I'll ever need this, but if I do, I'll have every page, every date, every signature. I want to tell you something about that building, because I know some of you are already asking the question that kept me up at night for years. Why didn't I just warn somebody? Go to the city? Go to the people who'd live there? I tried. The week after I signed, before I even left for Berkeley, I called the city building department in Stockton. I told a plan checker I had concerns about the structural review on a permitted project. He asked if I was the engineer of record. I wasn't. Roy was. He asked if I was currently licensed. I wasn't, not yet. He told me politely that a non-licensed former employee raising a design disagreement against a stamp set from a licensed PE wasn't something they could act on without exposing the city, and that the proper channel was the state licensing board. So I drafted a complaint to the board, and the firm's outside counsel sent me a letter reminding me that my separation agreement included a non-disparagement clause and that knowingly false statements about the firm's work could expose me to a defamation claim, with my uncle, a respected licensed engineer, on the other side, and me, a resigned junior with a professionalism concern in my file. I was 25 and $4,000 from broke. I want to be honest with you. I got scared, and I went quiet, and I have carried that. The folder was the promise I made to myself that the silence wasn't going to be permanent. Berkeley was a different planet. Nobody there knew my uncle. Nobody knew the story. I was just a grad student trying to understand failure. My thesis was on internal reporting suppression in engineering firms. What happens to the engineer who flags a problem, and what happens to the problem after they're gone? I surveyed 240 early career engineers. 68% said they'd spotted something they believed was a safety issue. Of those, less than half had reported it up the chain. The number one reason they gave for staying quiet was fear of retaliation from a senior they'd have to contradict. My advisor read my draft and said, "Quinn, this can't just sit in a library. This needs to be out in the world." I presented it at a regional structural engineers conference in the spring of 2022, and in the audience was a woman named Imogen Foss, who ran a nonprofit called the Center for Built Environment Accountability. They investigate structural failures and push for reform in how the industry handles safety reporting. She found me after my talk, handed me her card, and said, "I think you should be doing this for real." 3 months later, I had a job. Forensic Safety Analyst, Oakland. $66,000 a year. My badge said Quinn H. No Vance attached to anything. My whole job was to take apart failures and near misses reported by firms and cities across the western states, find the pattern, and recommend changes so it didn't happen again. And God help me, I was good at it. I knew exactly what it looked like when an organization decided its reputation mattered more than its load path. I'd lived inside one. My third month there, a case came across my desk that stopped my heart. A parking structure in another county had partial collapse during a port. One worker killed, 2 hurt. I read the file and my hands were shaking before I was halfway through. A junior engineer had flagged a deficiency in a transfer element months earlier. A senior had overruled it. The firm had logged the original concern as resolved. Different state, different names, different building, same exact machine grinding the same exact way. I wrote a 40-page review on that one. I documented the buried concern. I named the suppression for what it was. My supervisor read it and called me in and said, "This is the most important thing anyone's put on my desk this year." By late 2023, I'd been promoted to senior analyst. Then I led a multi-firm study, 12 other analysts, 3 years of reporting data from over 900 firms, looking for exactly the pattern that had eaten my career. We published it in the spring of 2025. The headline finding: in nearly 4 out of 10 firms we studied, we found at least one documented case of a safety concern being administratively closed without independent review, and the people who raised those concerns were overwhelmingly the most junior person in the room. The study got picked up. State boards cited it. I started getting invited to speak, and somewhere in there, I went to a cousin's wedding. Fall of 2024, a vineyard outside Lodi. First time I'd been around the family in 3 years, and there was my uncle in a gray suit holding court at a table with a couple of guys from the firm mid-story. I drifted close enough to hear. "My niece tried engineering," he was saying. "Sharp kid, but you put her on a live project with real deadlines and she came apart. Couldn't take the pressure of having her name on the line. She does some kind of safety policy thing now. Non-profit work. Not real engineering, but it suits her." One of the men asked what kind of safety work. My uncle saw me standing there. I know he did. Our eyes met, and he said, "Oh, you know, committees, reports." The soft side, better fit for her temperament. A year before, that would have gutted me. That night, I just raised my glass an inch, smiled, and walked away. Because 4 months earlier, I'd gotten an email I hadn't told a single person in my family about. It was from the program chair of the Pacific Structural Safety Summit, the big annual gathering for structural engineers, code officials, and building safety folks across the western states. They wanted me to give the closing keynote in October 2026 on the future of safety accountability in the profession. 400 plus attendees, and the email said, "We're especially pleased to share that your uncle Garrick Vance sits on our advisory council, and when your name came up, he spoke very warmly of you. He said you'd be a wonderful choice." He was delighted. He thought I'd come give a nice, soft, harmless talk, 20 minutes on transparency and culture. Maybe a warm word about the family firm that gave me my start, something that made him look like the patriarch whose niece found her gentle little lane. I said yes the same day. For 18 months, I built that talk. Not a feel-good lecture. A case study. Detailed. Anonymous at first. Anonymous firm. Anonymous senior reviewer. Anonymous junior engineer. Anonymous building. The arc was simple: what was found, what was reported, what was buried, and what it cost. 40 slides. And then, in August of 2026, I opened the folder, Pacific Ave 2020, and I added the last one. Slide 36, a date and a time. April 23rd, 2020, 5051 p.m. Slide 37, the full text of my uncle's email to HR. Every word. High enough resolution to read from the back of the room. Slide 38, my QC escalation on the transfer beam, time-stamped March 11th, 2020, filed 6 weeks before that email. Slide 39, 3 documents side by side. My review memo flagging the deficiency, dated March 9th. The no action required closeout. His email recommending I be transitioned off technical review. Slide 40, a single line. The junior engineer resigned. The senior reviewer faced no inquiry. The beam was never independently reviewed. And slide 41. I'll get to slide 41. I sent the deck to the conference AV team in September. I didn't tell them what was in the last 6 slides. The day before the summit, I got a call from a number I didn't know. I almost let it ring out. It was a woman named Teodora Reyes. She'd been the QC coordinator at the firm back in 2020, the one whose desk my escalation had landed on before it got closed out. She'd left the firm years ago. "I heard you're giving the keynote tomorrow," she said. "I've thought about you for 6 years, Quinn. I want you to know, I read your memo when it came in. You were right. It was the cleanest deficiency flag I ever saw from a junior, and it got buried over my head, and I let it go because I needed the job, and I have never forgiven myself for it." Her voice broke. "Go up there and tell the truth. Don't soften it. Don't you dare soften it for any of them." I sat in my hotel room a long time after that call. October 4th, 2026. The Brennan Center Ballroom, 40 round tables, chandeliers, 2 big donor plaques on the wall, and yes, one of them had the Vance name on it, because of course it did. The AV tech loaded my slides and said, 41, you're all set. I told him, if it goes dead quiet after slide 36, that's supposed to happen. Don't touch anything. My uncle found me during the reception, of course, put his arm around my shoulders and steered me toward a knot of senior people. "This is my niece," he said, "tonight's keynote. She does wonderful work on the policy side of safety." They shook my hand. He answered most of their questions for me. "Quinn left the technical side a few years back," he told them. "Smart pivot. The pressure of stamped work wasn't her thing, but she's found a real home in the softer side of the field." One of them said my uncle bragged about me constantly. I said, "Does he?" My uncle laughed and squeezed my shoulder and said, "I tell everybody. Quinn's proof there's more than one way to serve the profession. Not everybody's built to carry a project." For 45 minutes, table to table, he told it 12 times in 12 small variations. Smart but not steady. Tried the hard stuff, came apart, found her gentle lane. By the time they called dinner, a woman from the licensing board had taken my hand and said, "There's no shame in knowing your limits, dear." My uncle lifted his glass and said, "Quinn's still useful, just on the quieter side of things." And the table laughed, and I laughed with them. And I watched him walk to table 2, 4th row back, and sit down facing the screen with a clear line of sight. They served the salmon. He was relaxed, laughing, telling another story to the people on his left. At 8:20, the program chair stood up. "Our closing speaker has reshaped how this profession thinks about safety and accountability. Her research has been cited by licensing boards in 4 states, and she comes from real engineering stock, the daughter and spirit of one of our own advisory council members, Garrick Vance. Please welcome Quinn Halloway." 400 people applauded. I walked to the podium. I found my uncle's face in the 4th row, smiling, comfortable. And I clicked to slide 1. "Thank you," I said. "Tonight I want to talk about what happens when an organization decides that its reputation is worth more than the truth its own people are trying to tell it." The first stretch was research, statistics, the reporting suppression data. The room was professional, engaged, nodding along. My uncle looked perfectly at ease. Then I started the case study. In the spring of 2020, I said, a junior structural engineer found that a transfer beam on a 4-story residential project had been undersized. The load path ran through a member that would not hold under a credible seismic event. She documented it. She raised it with the senior reviewer of record. She was told to stay in her lane. I clicked. She escalated it through the firm's formal quality control channel anyway. The drawings went out for permit the following week. Her concern was closed out as, and I'm quoting the file, "no action required." The nodding had stopped. The room was quiet in a different way now. 6 weeks later, I said, her access badge stopped working. I walked them through it. The HR meeting. The improvement plan built to be failed. The choice that wasn't a choice. The junior engineer's career ended, I said. The senior reviewer faced no inquiry. And the building, I let it sit. The building went up exactly as drawn. People live in it right now. You could feel the temperature in the room change. People were leaning in. A few were glancing at each other. For 6 years, I said, the story this engineer's own family and firm told was that she cracked, that she couldn't handle the pressure, that she found a softer lane. I saw my uncle's smile start to come apart at the edges. Then I clicked to slide 36. The date filled the screen. April 23, 2020, 5:51 p.m. I looked straight at table 2. This, I said, is the email that ended her career. I read the subject line out loud slow. Performance concern. Q. Holloway. Confidential. And then I read the sender. Garrick Vance, Principal, Meridian Vance and Associates. I read the recipient, and then I stopped talking and I let 400 structural engineers read my uncle's words off a 20-foot screen. I have never heard a room that quiet. I heard someone 2 tables over breathe out, "Oh no." I heard a chair creak. 40 seconds maybe of absolute silence while they read a man explain that his niece's challenge to a senior partner's review reflected poor professional maturity. I clicked to 38. She raised the structural deficiency through the formal channel on March 11th, I said. 6 weeks before that email was written. I want to be precise about the order of events, because the order is the whole story. She was not removed for being wrong. She was removed for being right in front of the wrong person. Slide 39. The 3 documents side by side. The memo. The closeout. The email. The deficiency was logged on the 9th, I said. It was closed on the 11th. She was gone by May 1st. The transfer beam was never independently reviewed by anyone. People were openly turning to look at my uncle now. He was staring at his plate. His hands were flat on the white tablecloth and they weren't moving. Then I did the thing I'd told myself for years I'd do if I ever earned the right to. Slide 40 came up. The line about the resignation, the lack of inquiry, the unreviewed beam. And I said, I told you this case was anonymous. It isn't. I'm the junior engineer. And after I left, I didn't stop. In 2024, the Center for Built Environment Accountability, with my full recusal, conducted an independent peer review of the structure at 144 Pacific Avenue in Stockton. I clicked to 41. That review confirmed the transfer beam is under capacity. The building is occupied. As of last month, the city has issued a notice requiring a retrofit, and a licensed structural engineer of record has now formally taken on its correction. I paused. Nobody has been hurt in that building. I have thought every single day for 6 years about how close that is to not being true. The silence after that was a physical thing. I didn't come here for revenge, I said, and I made myself look right at the 4th row. I came because silence protects firms, not people. I came because the most junior person in the room is usually the only one with nothing to lose by telling the truth, and we keep punishing them for it. And I came because the man who raised me taught me something the night my badge stopped working, though he'd never put it this way. His eyes came up off the plate and met mine. He taught me that when someone with power tells you to be quiet, you document everything. You keep every page. You build your credibility somewhere they can't touch it. And when the day comes that you've got the microphone and they're in the 4th row, you tell the truth, even when your hands are shaking. I let a breath go. Especially then. I clicked the screen black. For about 5 seconds, there was nothing. Then a woman in the back stood up and started to clap. Then a whole section, maybe 200 people on their feet, maybe 150 stayed seated, clapping politely, not standing. A scattering didn't clap at all. Table 2 did not move. My uncle sat perfectly still, looking down, his hands flat on the cloth. I stepped off the stage and went straight out the side exit. I wasn't running, I just had nothing left in me. The parking lot was cold for October, dry valley air, a sky full of stars. I'd just unlocked my car when I heard his shoes on the asphalt behind me. Quinn. His tie was loose, his jacket open, his hands jammed in his pockets. He stopped about 8 feet away. You ambushed me, in front of the whole profession. I held my car door open. I didn't get in. You buried a structural deficiency, I said, in front of nobody. Roy was my best friend for 30 years, he said. And the firm, do you have any idea the liability if we'd reopened a stamped, permitted set? The lawsuits? The reputation? The thing your grandfather built. A beam that wouldn't hold, I said. That's the only thing on that list that ever mattered. You had options, he said, and his voice cracked. I gave you options. You could have done policy, research, anything. You didn't need to be on the technical side. I was trying to. You don't get to say you were trying to protect me, I said. You wrote that email 4 weeks after I escalated to make sure nobody ever took a second look at Roy's stamp. You protected your friend and your name. Don't put me in it. He looked at me the way people do when they're waiting to be forgiven. Waiting for me to tell him I understood, that it was complicated, that we could move past it. I didn't. I got in the car. I started it. I rolled the window down a few inches because there was one more thing. You can be my family again, I said, when you write to the building official in Stockton and to the licensing board and you put your name on a statement that says a junior engineer flagged that beam in 2020 and you made it disappear to protect a stamp. When you tell the truth on the record with your signature on it. Do that and we can talk, not before. I drove out of that lot and I got on the freeway and I went home an hour and a half through the dark and I didn't cry and I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt scraped out and clean. The week after, my phone was full of messages from people I'd never met. Some of them said it was the bravest thing they'd seen at a conference in 20 years. A few said I'd been cruel, that there were professional ways to handle a family matter, that I'd ambushed an old man. I read all of them. I didn't answer any. My uncle did not call. My aunt did not call. 11 days after the summit, a letter came in his handwriting. 2 pages. He wrote about the firm's exposure, about my grandfather's legacy, about the impossible position he'd been in, about how he'd only ever wanted to spare me a harder road. He wrote that he hoped in time we could find our way back to each other. I read it twice, looking for 2 words. They weren't anywhere on either page. He never wrote that he was sorry. I mailed him back 1 paragraph. I gave you the terms in the parking lot, I wrote. They haven't changed. Put it on the record, with your signature, the way I had to put my whole life on the record to be believed. Do that and we can talk, not before. 2. That was 4 weeks ago. I haven't heard back. I don't think I will. Roy Castellan quietly took early retirement 2 weeks after the summit. No reason given. My uncle stepped down from the summit's advisory council. The firm's other principals have, I'm told, requested an outside review of 3 other projects from that era. I don't know what they'll find. I hope it's nothing. I'm afraid it won't be. People ask if I regret it. I don't. I regret that it took 6 years and a stranger's phone call to make me believe I had the right. I regret every night I let myself wonder if maybe I really had cracked, the way everyone said. But standing up there? No. Somebody had to put it on the screen. And if I didn't, with the microphone in my hand and the receipts in my pocket, who was going to? I didn't do it to destroy him. I did it because the silence was destroying me. A little more every year and I was finally done carrying a lie that wasn't even mine to hold. So if you've ever been the one who saw the problem and said it out loud and got buried for it, at work, in your family, anywhere, I need you to hear this. You are not weak for speaking up. You are not cruel for refusing to keep somebody else's secret. Write it down. Save every page. Keep your receipts because the truth doesn't have to be loud to win. It just has to be undeniable, and it has to outlast them. Tell me in the comments if you've ever spoken up and paid for it. Tell me where you are tonight. Let's bind each other, because not one of us is as alone as they wanted us to feel. For 6 years, I let myself believe that maybe the smallest, ugliest version of the story was the true one. That maybe I really had cracked on the Pacific Avenue project. That's the part nobody warns you about. When the person who raised you tells a lie often enough, it stops feeling like his lie and starts feeling like your secret. My uncle didn't just bury a beam. He buried my own sense of what I knew to be true, and for a long time I helped him do it, because doubting myself was easier than accepting that someone I loved would trade my whole future to protect a friend's signature. But look at how it actually moved, link by link. Roy Castellan dismissed a problem because admitting it would have cost him pride. My uncle backed him because admitting it would have cost him a friendship and a reputation. And every choice they made to keep themselves comfortable became a choice they made about a building people would sleep inside. That's the thing about cutting a corner to spare yourself. The corner doesn't disappear, it waits. It sat in that transfer beam for 6 years while 2 grown men told a story about a girl who couldn't handle pressure. And the only reason that story didn't end with a funeral is luck. I refuse to take credit for. What pulled me out wasn't anger, and it wasn't even being right. Being right in 2020 got me nothing but a dead badge. What changed everything was the decision, sitting on my apartment floor with $81,000 of debt to keep every page. To refuse to lie even when lying would have been so much warmer. That's the first thing I'd hand you if I could hand you anything. Your refusal to misrepresent what you saw is the one possession nobody can revoke, suspend, or vote you out of. The second thing is harder because being honest isn't enough on its own. I had to go learn my systems fail, get the degree, build the research, earn a place where my voice carried weight. Truth, with no standing behind it, just gets filed under no action required. You have to become someone the room can't dismiss. And the third thing, the one that cost the most, was staying in the fight long after it would have been easier to take the marketing job and disappear into a comfortable lie. Endurance isn't loud. It's a flash drive in a safe deposit box and a promise to yourself that the silence won't be permanent. So if someone is telling a smaller story about you right now, hear me. Don't argue with them. Outlast them. Keep your integrity when it's expensive. Sharpen yourself until you're undeniable, and hold the line through the years when nobody's clapping. Quinn Holloway didn't win in that ballroom. I won every quiet night I chose not to become the failure they'd already named me.